I just told you a little while ago, these leaders that they call leaders, this included Lena Horne, this included Dick Gregory, and this included comedians, comics, trumpet players, baseball players. Show me in the white community where a comedian is a white leader. Show me in the white community where a singer is a white leader, or a dancer or a trumpet player is a white leader. These aren't leaders. These are puppets and clowns that have been set up over the white community and over the black community by the white community and have been made celebrities and usually say exactly what they know that the white man wants to hear.
He said these are not leaders, these are puppets and clowns, referring to comics being propped up by the white establishment to so-called lead the black community. And even as he makes a mistake, even as he slips up, Malcolm X is still prophetic. And now we're seeing that even in the white community, the same counterinsurgent methods are being used. Now, whether you support Joe Rogan or Marc Maron, the question here is, should comics even be in politics? Now, I'm not saying whether or not they should joke about politics. Sure, do whatever you want on stage. However, should they be involved in politics outside of their stand-up? Should they be influencing the so-called culture? Now, I'm not going to focus on Joe Rogan and the Rogansphere because there's plenty of videos highlighting and breaking down how pathetic it is that he's dictating what comedy is. I mean, this is a guy who only really caught a break because Mitzi Shore from the Comedy Store had a liking to him. But even as a kid watching Talking Monkeys in Space on Spike TV, I wasn't impressed. Rogan was never popular because of his comedy, not because of his stand-up. It was news radio. It was commentating for the UFC. It was Fear Factor. It was his podcast that broke through, not his stand-up. I mean, prior to that, he was most known for calling out Carlos Mencia.
No, I've never stole
George Lopez didn't grab you by your fucking neck and slam you up against the Laugh Factory wall for ripping off your shit. You ain't feel special?
He did. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. But you know what they did?
You're a fucking liar, bro.
That's not why.
And yet he switched up when Amy Schumer was on his podcast, and everyone knew that she was also a joke thief.
Only the one bit. It was only the Wendy Liebman joke, right? Well, there's another Marc Maron one, too. But the Marc Maron one that people are saying is like, boy, that's a pretty obvious premise. But, you know, I don't know, man. Who the fuck knows? You know, who knows? It's not good. If I wasn't friends with her, if she was anybody else, people would want her head.
Yeah.
If she was some asshole, you know? Like if she was Mencia, like if this came out that Mencia had a new show and all this shit was on, people would want his head. There would be blood in the water.
Instead, what I'm going to be focusing on is Marc Maron and the influences around Air America and Jon Stewart with The Daily Show and the liberals' pathetic attempt to combat these right-wing mouthpieces, when in fact, liberals are part of the problem. Maron's bit about Theo and Hitler is hilarious and too accurate for comfort. However, Maron has been after Joe Rogan and the Rogansphere for quite some time now because he recognizes that they're hacks. Even before it got political, he disliked them. And I don't know why everyone's acting like Joe Rogan and Maron have to like hang out. They've done it before, and Maron just showed his belly the entire time. But again, this was when it was strictly about comedy and not really about politics. Joe Rogan's right-wing turn was fairly predictable. He's clearly a meathead, always misses jokes that go over his head with his whole martial arts background. I mean, find me a gym that doesn't have a Blue Lives Matter flag or some type of military service flag and sign me up. It's almost impossible. Add to the mix that he was getting filthy rich. I mean, it was unavoidable. The guy likes to pretend that he was the average Joe, but he spent most of his time in Hollywood. While they couldn't be any more different on stage, it's kind of hilarious the parallels that Marc Maron and Joe Rogan have off stage, which I'm sure adds to Maron's disgruntled hatred, a constructive criticism, whatever you want to call it, towards Rogan. Before Joe Rogan had Donald Trump, before he had Bernie Sanders, before he had any politician, Marc Maron had Barack Obama in his garage. And it's this self-righteous smugness of saying, I get to dictate, I get to choose what war criminals we get to humanize that I can't stand.
Clearly, presidents go on your podcast for a reason. You can't laugh it off. And I think
people running for president.
People running for president.
It's a very different game.
Oh, well, that's the other question. When you see people running for president going on podcasts, do you have parts?
We would never do that.
Oh, really? Do you feel so do you feel at all reflect upon your influence on having podcasts seem as a political space in that way?
Well, I mean, I think that we went out of our way to, you know, the only thing that made it a political space when Obama was on was that he was a sitting president. But the goal was not to do that kind of interview. Yeah. That wasn't going to, necessarily serve as policy. or have that wonky conversation, but we never have politicians on because, I have experience in talking to politicians from Air American stuff, and you cannot have a campaigning politician on, almost in any way without signing off on whatever they're doing, even if you're pushing back. It just, you're giving them the space, so you want to be part of their campaign, even if you're pushing back, you're still part of their campaign, and they're going to use you as such.
I mean, look at Maron's face. He's appalled, almost disgusted that anyone would even suggest that what he did with Barack Obama is anywhere close to what Joe Rogan did with Donald Trump. That he wouldn't ever interview a politician while he was on a campaign. But you're going to tell me that going into re-election, Marc Maron would have denied Obama? Now here's the issue. This is towards the end of Obama's second administration. He had already committed war crimes, and he had already failed to complete his promises to American people. He had already embraced the right-wing turn of the Democratic Party that started with Bill Clinton and arguably with Carter. Now keep in mind the interview was in 2015 and Barack Obama's term ended in January 2017. There was plenty to talk about, and they did talk about politics. Whether it was about gun control, healthcare, or the surveillance state, Maron never pushed back, not once.
For the last 6.5 years, what I've tried to do is to build up a legal structure that is consistent with our values and due process, build up a intelligence system that is consistent with our civil liberties. Yeah. And sometimes my supporters will write and say, there's some stuff here that you're doing that's just like Bush. And what I explain to them is the problems with the excesses of our counterterrorism approach after 9/11 were real, and waterboarding and torture and renditions. Right. We stopped. But that doesn't mean that we don't have real problems out there and that there aren't balances that we've got to strike and figure out. And it's complicated. And we've got to be mindful that whatever abstract views you have about drones or that you have about intelligence gathering, that if you were sitting there in the Situation Room, you'd realize that you've got some responsibilities and you've got some choices to make. And it's not all clear cut.
Sure, he wasn't campaigning, but Maron was helping Obama whitewash his presidency before it was even over. Now here was Obama in Maron's garage, downplaying and trying to normalize his use of drones. And Maron couldn't muster the courage, he could not find his spine to push back, not once. And yet he lacks the self-awareness to realize that he's a hypocrite when he's complaining that reactionary comedians are doing the exact same thing that he did for Obama, but for Donald Trump and the Republican Party. But this seems to be the norm with these political comedic commentators.
Is the answer, the Democratic Party's ripe for a takeover, and they just need to find the right reality host that can get in there and start lining up all of those interests.
Please, no reality host. I beg of you.
Jeff Probst, maybe Jeff Probst, Survivor.
Unless John, you're thinking of throwing your hat in the ring, which I know many people want you to throw your hat in the ring. If that's what you're suggesting, we can talk about that. But
the so-called independent left media has been begging Jon Stewart to run for the presidency. They want their own celebrity up there. That's their solution to losing to Donald Trump. These liberals are always falling behind the Republican Party. It's pathetic. Liberals love to praise Jon Stewart for taking down Tucker Carlson in Crossfire, not realizing that he exposes himself as a hypocrite when he hides behind being a comic, being on Comedy Central, following a puppet show for his excuse of why he can't ask presidential candidates like John Kerry hard-hitting questions.
The thing is, we need your help. Right now you're helping the politicians and the corporations, and we're left out there to mow our lawns.
You just said we're too rough on them when they make mistakes.
No, you're not too rough on them. You are part of their strategies. You're partisan, what do you call it, hacks.
Wait, John, let me tell you something valuable that I think we do that I'd like to see you do.
Something valuable?
Yeah, no, it's nice when politicians, and I'll tell you, when politicians come on, it's nice to get them to try and answer the question. And in order to do that, we try and ask them pointed questions. I want to contrast our questions with some questions you asked John Kerry.
If you want to compare your show to a comedy show, you're more than welcome to.
Here's the point.
If that's your goal,
no, it's not.
I wouldn't aim for us. I'd aim for Seinfeld.
Here's the problem.
That's a very good show.
Kerry won't come on this show. He will come on your show. Let me suggest why he wants to.
Well, we have civilized discourse.
Well, here's an example of civilized discourse. Here are three of the questions you asked John. You have a chance to interview the Democratic nominee. You ask him questions such as, quote, how are you holding up? Is it hard not to take the attacks personally? Have you ever flip-flopped, et cetera, et cetera? Didn't you feel like you got the chance to interview the guy? Why not ask him a real question instead of just suck up to him?
Yeah, how are you holding up is a real suck-up.
Jon Stewart slips up multiple times in this interaction, and for whatever reason, liberals don't pick it up. He literally says that the reason why politicians are comfortable going on The Daily Show with him, it's because he has civilized discourse on his show. I'm going to link that interview. It's old as hell, but watch it and tell me if there's any difference between what Jon Stewart is doing and what Jimmy Fallon did for Donald Trump. But at least Jon Stewart, unlike Marc Maron, wasn't hiding behind the fact that, oh, I wouldn't interview a politician on a campaign. But I think it proves that Marc Maron, just like Jon Stewart, would have done a fluff interview for Barack Obama's re-election campaign as well. Because these self-righteous liberals truly believe that they're helping and aiding the country by promoting the Democratic Party, even when they're aiding and abetting a genocide of Palestinians by the Zionist entity. There are no red lines for liberals. They have no principles. They have no standards that they're willing to step over, forget, ignore, and break apart for the Democratic Party. I truly can't understand the smugness of the liberal mind. The segment on Crossfire ends with Jon Stewart at a loss for words by a simple question by an audience member.
Why do you think it's hard or difficult or impossible for politicians to answer a straight, simple question?
I don't think it's hard. I just think that nobody holds their feet to the fire to do it, so they don't have to. They get to come on, shows that don't.
Were they too easy on them?
Yeah.
Not easy.
How you holding
You
up
began by saying we were too hard on people and too difficult or contentious.
I think yeah.
All right, Jon Stewart, come back soon.
Jon Stewart, good of you to join us. Thank you very much. The book is America, A Citizen's Guide to Democracy.
Jon Stewart does not ask the hard questions of politicians, and neither will his comedic peer, Marc Maron. But like Malcolm X said, what do we expect from these clowns? The role of liberals is not to challenge power. Now, it's important to keep in mind that while Maron had criticisms of Joe Rogan personally or his comedy, this whole raging out about Rogan's political position, as well as Theo and others in the Rogansphere, is being done while he's doing a press tour. While I'm not saying he doesn't mean what he's saying, that he's not genuine in his criticism, he definitely is. This is also financially benefiting him and bringing more attention to his HBO special, which again, I thought it was great. In this press tour, he was reunited with his old Air American friend, Sam Seder. For those of you that don't know what Air America was, it was essentially the liberal response to right-wing AM talk radio, or like the cool kids NPR. It was a bunch of mediocre comedians trying to cover politics, and Marc Maron is forced to address his hypocrisy.
The right-wing political comics is that there's a blurring of the line of comic and commentator or influencer. All of a sudden, within the last 10 years, you have comedians who are like, talking about, China relations. And it's like, okay, I guess that's part of the job. I don't know when that happened, but
I mean,
what?
I mean, Air America was certainly
so we
part
did
of
it. Another thing, it's our fault. Okay.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's necessarily something wrong with it. Obviously, that's what I do. I don't know that I'm a comedian. I feel like I'm more of like a political commentator who's mildly amusing.
You're very funny.
But more importantly, he acknowledges that he lacked the knowledge to actually be talking about politics and has just started to get comfortable with it now.
And also to speak in depth about politics, I'm usually over my head, and it's taken me a long time to just be broad enough from however much I'm informed to make statements that I think are based in my beliefs. I mean, when I was on Air America, or even on our show, I was out of my depth in a lot of ways, just with, keeping on top of the narrative and being able to sort of critically understand it. So I don't claim to do that. But I think a lot of people now, because of the advent of never-ending bullshit information, they claim that they can do that. And the right wing has opened up the sort of expanded the minds of fairly shallow people into believing that they can debate, that they have a point of view, and that it's based in this very slippery slope of evolving bullshit that gets them worked up.
And yet Maron is incapable of saying, I'm part of the problem. He's talking to a failed stand-up, failed Hollywood sitcom producer, Sam Seder, who has over 1 million subscribers and can't even define what anti-Zionism or Zionism is.
Rotten the Pig says, if you're not anti-Zionist if you believe that Israel has a right to exist. Do you believe Israel has a right to exist? I don't know about that.
How?
I mean, well, no. Like, I believe Israel has a right to exist. I just don't think it can exist as a Jewish state as opposed to a democratic one. Like, I mean, I think, and I think we'll probably have a guest on in this in terms of like, the definition of Zionism is sometimes can be a little bit like sort of evasive. I don't know that I've ever really considered myself anti-Zionist per se. But if being a Zionist is to support Israel as it is currently configured, fundamentally so, that we have a tier of second-class citizens and then also maintaining what is now appears to be a permanent occupation, not annexation, then yes, I am an anti-Zionist. But I don't think that Israel should disappear.
Again, the question is whether they're a failed comic or not. Should they be talking about politics off stage? Why are we listening to them? I can't stress this enough. I think Marc Maron is hilarious, and it's great to see a comic get better as he ages. But when it comes to politics, he's a hypocrite. And the rest of these comedic commentators, these liberal hacks, cannot truly combat these reactionary propagandists because their ideology forbids them from doing so. Because that's not their role. Their role is to maintain the status quo while making you believe that they're making things better. From The Pitfalls of Liberalism by Kwame Ture, the reason the liberal seeks to stop confrontation, and this is the second pitfall of liberalism, is that his role, regardless of what he says, is really to maintain the status quo rather than to change it. He enjoys economic stability from the status quo, and if he fights for change, he is risking his economic stability. What the liberal is really saying is that he hopes to bring about justice and economic stability for everyone through reform, that somehow the society will be able to keep expanding without redistributing the wealth. What the liberal really wants is to bring about change which will not in any way endanger his position. The liberal says it is a fact that you are poor, and it is a fact that some people are rich, but we can make you rich without affecting those people who are rich. I do not know how poor people are going to get economic security without affecting the rich in a given country, unless one is going to exploit another people's. I think that if we follow the logic of the liberal to its conclusion, we will find that all we can get from it is that in order for society to become equitable, we must begin to exploit other peoples. Because of the above reasons, because the liberal is incapable of bringing about the human idealism which he preaches, what usually happens is that the oppressed whom he has been talking to finally become totally disgusted with the liberal and begins to think that the liberal has been sent to the oppressed to misdirect their struggle, to keep them confused so that the oppressor can continue to rule them. So whether the liberal likes it or not, he finds himself being lumped by the oppressed with the oppressor. Of course, he is part of that group. The final confrontation, when it does come about, will, of course, include the liberal on the side of the oppressor. Therefore, if the oppressed really want a revolutionary change, he has no choice but to rid himself of those liberals in his rank. Liberals, quite frankly, always pave the way for fascists. Whether it's Obama expanding drone warfare or restricting our civil rights, normalizing things legally that George W. Bush wouldn't even dare, or Hillary Clinton using the Pied Piper strategy to boost up Donald Trump because she thought it was going to be an easy victory. And yes, now she's praising him. Congrats. Congratulations, liberals. We definitely should have voted for her. But I'm not even truly mad at their actions. I understand what the role is. What I get annoyed about, what I'm frustrated about, what I'm disgusted about is the hypocrisy. It's the smugness. It's the self-righteous indignation that they pretend they have the right to have. Maron had the opportunity to confront Joe Rogan on Joe Rogan's own show. And again, I'm a fan of his comedy because of his personality. But when you roll over in front of Joe Rogan, when you're face to face, and later on you want to act tough when you're on a press tour for your new HBO special, I can't take you serious. More importantly, your politics don't deserve being taken seriously. Now tell me in the comments what other political commentator, what other lefty on YouTube was able to use Malcolm X and Kwame Ture in order to cover this Marc Maron Joe Rogan drama. I'll wait. You won't see it out there. So go ahead, if you're sick and tired of the same bland white takes, subscribe, hit the like, and more importantly, leave a comment. I appreciate it. Ya estuvo.
Por la buena, por la mala. Por la mala, por la buena. Por la buena, por la mala, por la mala, por la buena, por la buena, por la mala.